The baskets were already loaded before the rooster made his first sound. 2 of them, side by side on the buggy seat, jars of jam catching the lantern light. My hands had gone numb doing it, though I couldn't have told you if the cold was to blame, or something else entirely. The horse's breath came out in slow white clouds. Behind me, in the house, I could hear my husband moving around, dressing for a day he didn't yet know I'd already been dreading for 3. No one had told me a marriage could double a woman's morning before the sun even rose. I'm Aria. On this channel I say the things I spent years keeping folded small, the way you'd fold a dress you weren't sure you'd ever wear again. If this feels close to something in your own life, I'd be glad to have you stay and subscribe. And tell me below, what's something you've quietly done twice, for someone else's sake, without ever being asked if you minded? It was our 6th anniversary, and I stood in the cold barn at 5:30 doing arithmetic no one had asked me to do out loud. 2 baskets. 2 households. 1 morning. I'd like to say I felt nothing but the practical chill of the air, but that wouldn't be honest, and honesty is the only thing I have to offer you here. Underneath the cold sat something smaller and quieter, closer to dread than to the anticipation an anniversary was supposed to bring. I had married a kind man, and I loved him, in the plain, steady way our community understood love. But loading that second basket, unasked and unexplained, love and dread were sitting in the same chest that morning, and I didn't yet have a name for either one. I counted the jam jars twice, out of habit more than doubt. 6 in the first basket. 6 in the second, wrapped the same way, tied with the same string. I did the same with the loaves cooling under a towel by the door. 6, then 6 again, my hands moving through the motions before my mind had caught up to why. In our house, a woman didn't usually ask herself why she was doing what she was doing. She simply did it, the way her mother had, the way mornings had always gone. So I kept working by lantern light, my breath fogging in front of me, waiting for the sun and for an explanation neither one seemed in any hurry to give. To understand why 2 baskets made any sense at all, you'd need to understand what an anniversary meant where I came from. It wasn't roses or a restaurant table. It was food, always food, enough for whoever might arrive, invited or not. Sometimes there was a singing that evening, if the date fell kindly near a Sunday, voices carrying an old hymn out across a yard lit by nothing but a porch lamp. There was a word we lived inside more than we ever said aloud: Gelassenheit, a yielding of the self to something larger. I had loved that word once, without question. Standing in that barn, 6 years in, I was only just beginning to wonder what exactly I had yielded, and how much of it had never truly been asked for, only assumed. Here is the plain fact the title already gave you, though not yet the reason behind it. In my community, a wife's part of an anniversary wasn't owed to one home. It was owed to 2. My own, where my husband and I lived and slept and built our small life, and his parents, a mile down the road, where his mother expected her son's wife to arrive with food enough for the day, cooked and carried and served as if it were any other visiting Sunday. 2 baskets. 2 kitchens I'd be standing in before the day was through. 1 anniversary, halved so evenly between 2 houses that almost nothing was left over for the 2 people whose day it was supposed to be. I latched the second basket down and looked up, and that's when I saw a light moving in a neighbor's kitchen window across the field, someone else's morning starting the way mine had, small and early and unremarked. There is a strange comfort in that, watching another house wake up plain and ordinary while your own chest is doing something complicated. I remember breathing out slowly, watching it turn to fog and disappear, and thinking, at least the horse doesn't know anything is wrong. At least the horse would think this was simply Tuesday. My first anniversary, I'd asked my mother-in-law carefully, if perhaps that year we might keep things smaller, just the 2 of us. She looked at me with something between amusement and disappointment, the way you look at a child who has said something innocent and slightly foolish. Duty doesn't pause for celebration, she told me, and she wasn't unkind about it. She believed it completely, the way she believed the sun would rise. She had carried 2 baskets herself for 30 years, and her mother-in-law before her had done the same, an unbroken line of women dividing one day evenly between 2 houses that were never quite theirs. I didn't argue. I only remember something in me going very still, the way a room goes still after a door closes softly somewhere down the hall. It was my friend Leah, married 2 farms over, who told me months later that her husband's family expected the very same thing. 2 dinners, 2 baskets, the same quiet arithmetic repeated in a different kitchen. She said it the way you'd mention the weather, as if it had simply always been true and there was no use remarking on it further. Something in me both settled and cracked at once when she said it. Settled, because I wasn't the only woman doing this math alone at 5 in the morning. Cracked, because if it wasn't only my house, then it wasn't really about me at all. It was something older and bigger, something none of us had chosen and none of us had ever been asked about. I didn't have words for any of this yet, standing in that cold barn with 2 baskets latched and ready. I only knew, with a certainty that surprised me, that this day, the one day meant to mark the fact that I existed inside a marriage, had never fully belonged to me. I didn't know yet why that was true, only that it was. The horse shifted his weight and exhaled into the cold, and somewhere down the road, in a kitchen much like my mother-in-law's, someone was already listening for the sound of our wheels. The ride to his parents' house took 11 minutes. I know, because in 6 years I had counted them more times than I could say. That morning, somewhere around the 4th or 5th minute, I understood something I hadn't understood while latching the second basket. It wasn't really about the baskets. It had never been about the baskets, or the jam, or the bread cooling under its towel. It was about which household got to consider this day theirs. My own house had gotten the first basket, the earliest hours, the quiet work no one saw. His parents' house was getting the second basket, the visible hours, the ones that would be remembered and spoken of at the next gathering. Somewhere in between the two, my own day had simply gone missing. It took me years past that morning to find the words for what shaped it. In our community, a wife wasn't only married to her husband. She was grafted onto the whole structure standing behind him. His parents, his church district, the ordnung that quietly defined what a good wife's hours were for. There was very little room, in that structure, for a woman to ask what she might want on the one day meant to celebrate her own marriage. The question would have sounded strange, even whispered. We didn't have a word for wanting something just for yourself. We had Gelassenheit instead, yielding again and again, until yielding felt less like a choice and more like breathing. My husband wasn't unaware of any of this, and I want to be fair to him, because he has earned it. Somewhere past the halfway point of that ride, watching the road instead of me, he said, low, almost apologetic, "This really isn't fair to you, is it?" I told him the truth. No, it wasn't. He nodded, and for a moment I thought something might change. Then he said the other thing, the thing that always came right behind the first, but it's how it's always been done. He wasn't cruel in saying it. He was simply a man standing inside the same structure I was, inherited rather than chosen, just as unsure how to step outside it as I was. I don't want you to walk away from this thinking I'm describing a life that held nothing but grief, because that would be untrue, and I've promised you the truth. When we arrived, his mother met us at the door with her arms already out, and there was real warmth in that house. The smell of coffee, cousins underfoot, someone tuning up to sing later that evening. I have missed that kind of belonging more than I can easily say. Both things were true at once, and I've stopped trying to make one cancel out the other. The love was real. The cost was real too. That morning, I simply hadn't yet learned that a person is allowed to hold both without choosing sides. These days, my mornings look different. There's no barn, no second basket, no 11-minute ride I've counted out of habit. Some mornings I sit on my own porch with a cup of tea going lukewarm in my hands, and nobody is waiting for the sound of my wheels. It isn't dramatic, this new quiet. It's just mine. I still notice, sometimes, the old instinct rising up in me to double something before I've even thought about why, and then I notice myself setting it back down again, on purpose, slowly, like putting down something heavy I no longer have to carry. Here is what I understand now that I didn't understand in that barn. The doubling was never really about jam jars or bread loaves or which kitchen needed feeding first. It was about whose life the day was allowed to be built around. Mine was never supposed to be the answer. My time, on the one day meant to mark my own marriage, had quietly been organized around everyone else's needs before I'd even opened my eyes that morning. And I hadn't noticed, because no one had ever shown me it could be arranged any other way. It wasn't cruelty, exactly. It was inheritance. And inheritance is so much harder to question than cruelty ever is. I tell you this because I don't think I'm the only one who has quietly halved a day that was supposed to be hers. An anniversary, a birthday, an ordinary Sunday, without ever being asked if she minded the arithmetic. You don't have to have grown up the way I did for that to sound familiar. If it does, I hope you'll subscribe and stay a while, and I'd love to know in the comments what your version of the second basket has been. You are not the only one carrying one. I promise you that much. My anniversaries look smaller now, and quieter, and I've stopped apologizing for that. There's one basket these days, not two, and I'm usually the one who decides what goes in it. I still think some mornings of that barn. The cold, the lantern, the horse's slow breath. Not with bitterness, but with a kind of tenderness for the woman I was, who didn't yet know she was allowed to keep a whole day for herself. If there's one thing I hope you carry out of this, it's this: your day was never meant to be split evenly with everyone but you.